Hi folks, I'm Pagels-Minor. I'm a product and culture strategist supporting Fortune 100 companies, startups, and everyone in between. I'm also co-host of the podcast, The Drops Podcast, activist, and true tried Southerner. Welcome to my page. There's so many stories in 2022 that you can talk about, but the one that I find that's most fascinating is Elon Musk purchasing Twitter, and then the subsequent dismantling of Twitter by Elon Musk. So first and foremost, I think about this from a product strategy perspective, a business strategy perspective, but I also think about this from a reputational perspective, right? And I think that's something that a lot of organizations don't really think about when they think about the strategies that they employ to cut their costs and things like that. So for example, Elon Musk got Twitter and essentially laid off, like a third or half or some outrageously large number of employees when he first got there. First and foremost, I actually kind of agree with that, right? Like I do think that based on everything I know from the business fundamentals for Twitter, it was a business that continually ran at a deficit. It continually was going into debt. It was continually not profitable. And so if you have a business that's not profitable, you have to cut some sort of expense. And the most common expense that you cut are people. That's not to say that those people aren't valuable, aren't smart, aren't talented, haven't been loyal. It just simply is that it makes sense that you have to cut the number one expense that you have in a business, which is the expense of the employees that you have. The reason I started off with talking about reputational harm is that there's a way that you cut people, right? If you look at Better.com, that CEO got on live stream or a Zoom call or whatever you want to call it with the employees and basically berated his employees and said, we're going to lay all of you off because you're lazy. You weren't trying hard enough. You're the reason our company isn't profitable. But the simple fact is that you probably shouldn't hire someone if your company isn't profitable. So it's never really, I think, the responsible method of a CEO or any type of leader to say this is your fault. Because the reality is if the company wasn't fundamentally sound to start off with, that person should never have been hired. So it can never be the employee's fault that the company is failing. It is a lack of planning that causes the company to fail. So when Elon got there, he started bringing in all of his own team members. And one thing that I know after being in product for 15 years is that there is no way, no matter how talented you are, that you can simply step into someone else's ecosystem, architecture, technology stack, and understand how it works end to end in a week or 2 weeks, or even sometimes in 3 or 6 months. If you actually think about it, most companies that do M&A, so M&A is mergers and acquisition, most companies that acquire other companies, they build in that it's going to take up to 24 months to integrate those two products so the products actually work well together. So for instance, when the acquisition models go through, some acquisition models usually when the company that's going to be acquiring another company will start to look at the specific data around that company, how much revenue they think they're going to get, how many expenses they're going to get, how long it's going to take to integrate the systems, integrate the customers. They'll build in how long they think they have to retain all of those employees so they can actually transition to different teams, transition to different systems so the products work well together so they don't lose the value of the acquisition. And so based on everything that I know and what I saw, it seems like Elon Musk didn't bring that in. And so simply saying you must go without at least doing a better assessment as to which teams were responsible for what and how long that they might need to remain to understand exactly what was going on in those systems, I think that was a big failure. A second part of this, which is something that I happen to be privy to, partly because, by the way, I had been talking to some of the teams at Twitter about potentially coming on before Elon Musk started to make overtures of buying Twitter. And so I did a lot with compliance and security and things like that. And so those were the teams I was looking at. And so I was privy to the fact that, for instance, the FTC has currently a case that's going against the Twitter. And so basically with this case, there are certain things that Twitter has to do over a period of time to ensure that they're compliant. And so the FTC does not fine them millions or even potentially billions of dollars over time. In addition to the FTC case, obviously there's various legalities that are going on in the European Union. There's various legalities going on in Asian countries. And this is just the cost of doing business in a worldwide business nowadays. No matter what business you have, there's always regulations that are coming out. You have to figure out how to become compliant with them, and they're happening constantly. And so one of the first things that Elon Musk did was get rid of all of those security and compliance teams. And so again, just thinking about from a reputational, thinking about from a risk perspective, it didn't really make sense to me that you would decide to let go of these people first without ensuring that you have an entire team in place. Primarily because no matter how talented Elon Musk is, none of his previous companies have the same types of compliance and risk mechanisms that Twitter does. So there's no way, based on just simple logic, that he had someone at Tesla, at SpaceX, his pals from PayPal. He didn't have anyone in his system or his realm, based on what I've observed and other people have seen, that would allow him to have the talent already at hand who could tackle these types of problems. So again, if you think about how you transition this off, when you acquire some kind of company, the first thing you should be thinking of is going through your matrix of what do I need to actually transition these teams properly so that I can be successful. This isn't like we're giving handouts to these people. And so that's the thing that I think that people really get confused about. You retain talent a lot of times not because you're desperate. You retain talent because you're trying to create stability. You can bridge your product to its future state where it will be profitable. And so I couldn't see, based on anything that started at the very beginning of the Elon Musk taking over the company, how he was actually ensuring that he was going to create profitability. Because just simply getting rid of people, shutting down systems, rolling out subscription products, that's not enough. Stability and focus are actually the biggest qualities that I find in profitable and successful business. It's so interesting because one of the conversations that's also come up around the Twitter acquisition is, should this be allowed? So first and foremost, we are in a capitalist society, right? So in capitalism, in theory, if a product or business wants to sell itself and someone else wants to buy that product, presumably it should be allowed. One of the things I think is very complex about a service like Twitter is that even though people kind of make fun of Twitter, if you have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, even Tumblr, a lot of people would say, well, Twitter is kind of like the kid that, the redheaded stepchild who somehow has stuck around but has never been profitable, right? Even Snapchat in some ways has been more popular or thought of as a better business practice than Twitter in some cases. However, one of the nuances that I think that no one really understood, even myself until more recently, is how important Twitter is, especially in countries outside of the United States and Canada and the UK and France and all these countries that that often have been represented very loudly on the platform. But if you think about it, Twitter helped spur the Egyptian revolution. Right? Twitter is one of the reasons that we know what's going on in Ukraine. Twitter is why we understand clearly what's going on in Iran right now. So Twitter is actually, one of the nuances, and one of the engineers who ended up leaving Twitter, he was talking about how it's one of the few services that works on, just a cell phone that does not have a touch screen. You can still type in using your QWERTY keyboard how you can tweet something directly onto Twitter. The old school tweet where the young woman whose mother grounded her and took all of her devices, and she was actually able to tweet from her refrigerator, has been circling around, right? And so it's this idea that Twitter actually is so important for the international communities, for people to kind of coalesce together, for communities to kind of create evolution, create revolution, create change. It actually is a very important part of this product. And so there's been a lot of conversation around, should something be done to protect Twitter as a free space for free speech? Because even though that's something that Elon Musk has mentioned, it's kind of difficult to understand some of the decisions that have been made, for instance, with some of the reporters who have been suspended, right? Some of the people who it seemingly seems like they just simply disagreed with Elon Musk and then suddenly their accounts were suspended for periods of time. It's probably not okay that anyone, this is the bigger thing, regardless of whether you thought Twitter's old policies were right or not, the one thing that you knew was that there are a bunch of people in a room debating those policies. With the current regime, Elon Musk has the ability to simply say, suspend an account, and it will be suspended. That's a little terrifying. Because what happens if some really great, outrageous thing is happening in the world, and that happens to be happening in a country that is a friend of Elon Musk, right? If that happens to be happening to a candidate that Elon Musk thinks is great, or if this is just someone that he is friendly with, and someone is trying to speak truth, speak facts, is Twitter still going to be a safe place for people to have these conversations? And so I think that that's the thing that's most important. In fact, even with the Twitter files, I fundamentally think that maybe some decisions were made that probably weren't sound decisions, and there were probably inherent bias that might have gone into those decisions. And that's probably not okay. But at the same time, even the way that this information is being spread out into the world, that's also not okay. The one thing I loved about some of those services where they were just bringing out lots of information, like the WikiLeaks type of thing, was that you got to see the data and you got to make your own assumptions from that information. And so one of the things that I think is most concerning about all of this is the fact that it seems even more motivated to one type of conversation than it ever did when there was a bunch of other people running Twitter. And so I would really say that, from a regulatory perspective, I would be very interested to see if government said, hey, if you really think some wrongdoing has happened here, Elon Musk, actually present all of this data, and whether it's Congress, whether it's someone in the European Union, they can assess that information and then they can make decisions as to whether there were criminal acts that were done, whether people's rights were violated. But I definitely think these are the types of examples of things where this isn't about technology. This is actually about the fact that there are some services, whether you really understood them or not, they're foundationally so important to the future of kind of our society as a whole. And surprisingly, for many of us who used to make fun of Twitter, it turns out that without Twitter, a lot of change that has happened over the past couple of decades maybe wouldn't have happened. Hi folks, if you like what you heard today, feel free to like, subscribe, or click the notification bell and you get my content every single solitary day.